The History of SUs in the United Kingdom. SU for Dummies, Part 2. Students' unions started emerging in the UK during the 19th century. In 1922, the National Union of Students was founded with the aim to bring together SUs from across the country to work on big-picture politics. In particular, free and accessible education for students of all backgrounds, climate justice, and a decolonised education embedded in liberation and anti-racism. During the 60s, student unions became much more active. Many gained dedicated spaces and resources on campus to house shops, bars, clubs, and staff teams to support elected students and volunteers. With this growing capacity and a lack of opportunities to represent students academically, unions became more involved in campaigning. 1969. The NUS adjusted its constitution to allow campaigns on topics beyond those strictly related to students. This allowed SUs to campaign against the South African apartheid, as well as rent crises and grant cuts. 1980s. Students' unions were at most universities. Academic representation became more common, and most student unions developed their own forms of course reps. Today, in many universities, SUs facilitate the only forms of student representation.
SUs were originally set up as exempt charities and mainly received their funding from local authorities. This gave them the ability to fund their work without being scrutinised by universities who were often the target of their campaigns. But the government began to push back on student unionism. Over the coming years, changes in laws and the ways in which SUs were funded began to restrict their work and change their relationships with universities. In 1981, the main source of students' unions' funding was changed from local authority grants to block grants from parent universities. This gave universities influence over how much income SUs had and how it was spent. In 1994, the Charities Act set in law the role and purpose of students' unions as promoting the general interests of its members as students. This limited SUs' abilities to campaign on national and international issues, such as the miners' strike or apartheid. In 2006, the Charities Act forced SUs to be regulated by the Charities Commission. This significantly restricted the ways in which SU money could be spent and inhibited political activity, unless it was also deemed educational. The Charities Act also made it mandatory to set up a board of trustees. Despite these challenges, the NUS and students' unions have continued to advocate for students, campaign for wider political movements, and shape university life across the UK. The NUS provides important representation and powerful partnerships. This includes sitting on the boards of UCAS and the Office for the Independent Adjudicator. Through NUS's national events and conferences, these connections and knowledge are passed on to students' union officers and representatives, making a significant difference to unions at an institutional level. End of Part 2.